Good morning and welcome to this live edition of Analysis. In a very graphic programme, we look at the latest interface of man and machine in something called virtual reality. The newest release from Sun, a more powerful and even smaller workstation. In the studio, Andrew Hiles of the disaster recovery group Survive reviews their latest conference. And today's the day Toshiba launched their Colour Portable. But first, the IT headlines.
A new survey slams Unix. Lotus buys Samna word processing and JVC moves into telecoms.
Unix is not all it's cracked up to be, according to a user satisfaction survey out today. Computer Weekly and market research company DataPro carried out the survey that finds Unix has failed to make substantial inroads into either the large systems or PC user market. Unix is a main operating system at only 9% of large system sites. At PC sites, Unix is a main operating system in just 2% of cases. More depressingly still for Unix enthusiasts, just over half the PC users believe that Unix is unlikely ever to be their main operating system. But Unix isn't the only sufferer. 58% think the same of OS2. Well, with me to discuss the results is David Barrett, Special Projects Editor at Computer Weekly. David, welcome to the studio. Why the results on Unix, do you think?
I think part of the problem is everybody's been Unix trying to sell it, overhype it too much. And there's a contrast between the open systems people and manufacturers actually wanting to sell their own proprietary operating systems. I think the hype is actually higher than the market at the moment.
Are manufacturers not really making it clear what people should be using Unix for? I mean, very much a sort of get it out the door sell.
That could partly be it. Certainly on in the PC side, Sun workstations, about half of those, if not more, use Unix. So it does have a niche market. In the general area, then for PCs, people still prefer MS-DOS.
Interesting, because obviously in terms of low-cost, well, high-powered, low-cost workstations, presumably the Unix operating system is being punted very hard as sort of the power operating system to have on your PC.
And I think that's where its main market is. I don't know whether the Common Garden desktop PC will ever be a Unix machine as such.
Interesting.
But the same sort of things apply to OS2 as well.
It's had its heyday by the sounds of it.
I don't think it's ever had one. I think the problem with OS2 is there really isn't even a need for it. With the advent of Windows 3, most users can get what they want under Windows 3, running under MS-DOS. So why bother going to OS2 at all?
Have IBM sold it badly? I mean, have they sold it to the wrong people in actual fact?
Yeah. I think it was a fairly poor operating system from the start, from reactions that I've heard. And not terribly well marketed. It was too big and too heavy to start off with. Perhaps the slimmed-down version might have a different response.
How long before we'll know?
Let's look at next year's survey.
Apple, in the user satisfaction survey, came quite high up,
yeah.
Quite surprisingly, in traditional DP sites where IBM dominates in a way. How do you explain that?
I think it's a different machine from all the IBM clones. Everything else is basically a PC clone, whether it's got IBM stuck on it or somebody else's name. Obviously, Apple's machines are different. They have specific uses, and their users do like them.
You got some interesting results too from, I know we're skidding through this at a great rate of knots, obviously one could spend all morning talking about it. In the database and spreadsheet areas and word processing areas, now DBase comes quite low down, as does 123.
Yes.
Why?
I think here they are the market leaders. One of them takes, I think, 50% of the market, the other about 25%. I think it's possible they just become complacent. They know that they've got a good marketplace there, they know they have a large installed base. But I think also possibly, because they were very early on in the field, their competitors have come along later and brought out better products. And their competitors in some cases are smaller companies who are having to strive harder to produce a better product, make it look better, more bells and whistles, or cleaner running, whatever.
most people may be surprised seeing Lotus Manuscript 2 in the word processing states coming above Word and Word Perfect and WordStar. You know, one would have thought they would have come out top of the survey.
Yes, not that many people use Lotus Manuscript. It does seem that the best example really are the Borland products, Paradox and Quattro. That they have very, very few users, but those users are very satisfied with them.
Okay, finally, Dave, how can people get hold of the results?
Right. The Computer User Satisfaction Survey, Computer Weekly publications will be selling it for £135 per volume, one volume for PCs, one for minis and mainframes.
Sounds sensible. David Barrett, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Ken.
Workstation supplier Sun has launched its second-generation Spark stations, ranging in price from £11,000 to nearly £37,000. All the machines are delivered with 16 megabytes of main memory and 207 megabytes of hard disk storage, except the Spark server, which has 876 megabytes of disk storage. Sun says the top-end machines are intended to take the company into the area of 3D graphics. It also wants to push deeper into general computing, using the new machines as key components in client-server systems. Although the company has traditionally done well in the scientific area, it says the general-purpose computing is a crucial area to its future success.
On Monday this week, Sun launched the new SparkStation 2 Power User desktop computer system. In addition to that, we launched 3 new graphics products. We launched the GS, entry-level 3D graphics accelerator, and the GT, high-performance, high-quality 3D graphics accelerator. In addition, we brought out the GX graphics accelerator for the SparkStation IPC.
And how much do these cost?
Right, the entry level for a SparkStation 2 with the GX accelerator is around about £13,000 for a 16-inch monitor, 16 megabytes of memory, and 207 megabytes of disk. It's an entry level price. Entry level price for a SparkStation 2 with the GS accelerator is around the £20,000 mark, again with a similar specification, but with the GS 3D graphics accelerator. And coming in at the higher end, at about the £36,000 mark, is the GT. We've increased the specification in terms of minimum requirements for disk and memory capacity, but kept the price more or less the same.
Now, putting all that graphic functionality in such a small space must have been a technological headache. Does it have anything to do with this pizza box?
The GS does have the graphics accelerator, which fits inside the pizza base, as it's known, the pizza box. Also, the GX fits inside the pizza box. What Sun have done is put an open architecture bus, the S-bus, inside this pizza box, and this allows a great deal of expansion with boards from Sun and from third parties.
The traditional market for this sort of machine is, of course, engineering. Who are you aiming this new system at?
The GS and the GT are definitely aimed at the engineering marketplace, Sun's traditional marketplace, but we're aiming at high-volume CAD users. We're aiming at trying to put affordable accelerated graphics on every engineer's desk. And that's really where these high-end products come in. And there are other users in other areas who do need high performance of a SparkStation 2.
Sun's co-founder, Andreas Bechtelsheim, has pointed to the integration of key technologies as being important to Sun's success. What are they?
Sun's key technologies are really based upon the operating system, which is Unix, the processor architecture, which is Spark, the user interface, which is OpenLook, and the approach to networking, which we call Open Network Computing, ONC, and includes something called NFS, the Network File System. The real fundamental thing about Sun's core technologies is we license them openly into the marketplace. This is something which there's been a bandwagon over the last few years regarding open systems, but we feel we were one of the leaders, if not the leader, in open systems, because our approach is not just to link in with other hardware, but to make compatible hardware available from multiple vendors. That gives the users real choice, and we listen to the users, and we believe that's what they mean by open systems.
Lotus Development is buying word processor supplier Samner. The purchase is part of a plan to provide a family of applications compliant with Windows 3.0 by early next year. It values Samner at about $65 million. Lotus has made it clear it wants to have a series of products, not just its 123 spreadsheet program, spanning DOS, Windows, OS2, Unix, DECVAX and IBM MVS environments. It's expected that the purchase of Samner will go through without the problems that Lotus faced earlier this year when it tried to merge with networking specialist Novell. That proposal collapsed in an argument about how many Lotus and Novell shareholders would sit on the board of the new company.
JVC, the Japanese consumer electronics company, is to move into the telecommunications market. Its first product is to be a combined cordless telephone and telephone answering machine. That's aimed at the home market, but products for the USA and Europe are underway, including a range of GSM hand terminal equipment.
Orders, invoices, delivery notes, remittance advices. Paperless trading in the form of electronic data interchange, or EDI, should shift this paperwork from your desk to your company's computer. But is it that simple? At last week's EDI 90 exhibition and conference, suppliers and users got together to discuss the issues. Alex Lester went along to look at the technology.
How far has the technology come, and is this represented at the show?
Well, the show is a very good way of measuring progress in the industry. We've been involved in this show for right at the start in 1987, and then it was all to do with the pioneers, breaking ground on technology, etc. Now, if you go around the show, it's more to do with what EDI is really about, applications and getting business benefits from offering and using EDI services.
How serious is current interest in EDI?
I think it's very serious. We started off with the pioneers, the people who were moving back the boundaries of technology, and now we're getting, I think it would be wrong to call them followers, but people who are using the technology in their everyday business. So we're getting key management, key people involved in putting EDI in their everyday business at the show, and they're here today.
What are the main issues being discussed at the show?
Again, the issues change with the shows. In the early days, it was all to do with standards, technology, etc. Now it's more to do with the actual business itself. What am I going to do with it, and what benefits am I going to get? For instance, if you wander around the exhibition for the first time this year, we've got the major banks being very prominent in offering services for doing trade payments and those sorts of activities over the networks.
What still needs to happen to ensure that EDI is fully implemented in the United Kingdom?
Well, we've come a long way, but we've got a lot of work to do to make it easier for people to get involved. It's still quite hard work. You have to grapple with a new way of doing business, and the technology is just coming in place now so that you can do it in a standards way. So we need standard software, standard networks, and standard applications to make it easier to build the EDI applications and make computers talk to each other in a useful way.
You mentioned standards. How close are we to standards with EDI?
Well, the trouble with standards at the moment, we've got so many of them. Everyone wants to adopt standards as long as they're their own standards. We've done a lot of work implementing EDIFACT, which is the new international standard, which is just coming into everyday use. But we've got a long way to go, especially on a global scale. But we'll get there. We're making good progress, I think.
Bass Breweries is a big EDI user.
What are the benefits of EDI to Bass?
It's given us an ability to provide a much better service, as we've mentioned. It's allowing us to streamline our order processing. It's allowing us to take some paper out of the back end of the invoicing side. But again, so you must put that into context with the fact that the customers we're dealing with on EDI only form less than 10% of our customer base. In the longer term, it's likely that our plans for EDI will involve a heavy internal EDI loading. Because we're vertically integrated, we have an enormous flow of documentation and information between our producers and our retailers. And that area is one we see as being a big area for the future of EDI and Bass.
Are there any drawbacks, though?
Not a lot. We had one or two problems, as most companies who get involved with EDI do. The biggest problem that you have to overcome is adopting standards which your old systems probably weren't designed to develop with.
How do you see your use of EDI developing in the future?
We have attacked the supply chain from both ends. We are in fact receiving orders now from people like Tesco's and feeding them into our order processing systems and our distribution systems in the same way as we feed other orders. We've also attacked the other end of the chain through the invoice side, actually passing invoices out. What we have to do is to attack the middle of that chain, which is the big element, and look at the logistics side of the business, how we actually supply, how we deal with our customers and suppliers in a much more proactive way in supporting their businesses as well as our own.
How integral is EDI to your purchasing strategy?
It's an extremely important part of our strategy, but it depends on which industry that we're dealing with as to whether EDI is important or not. Some industries are very slow in adopting EDI as a strategy for them to pass information between the various constituents of that industry. And in those, we have alternative strategies that we will apply until such time they become more mature and move into EDI.
Would you prefer to buy off a company that uses EDI than one, for instance, that doesn't?
Oh, there are definitely substantial advantages in us dealing with a company that can provide us with EDI facilities.
Do you actually insist that everyone with whom you trade use EDI?
We don't insist at the moment because some industries are more advanced than others, some are less advanced.
Ken, is EDI all it's cracked up to be?
Well, I think the rationale behind EDI is very convincing, but the problem is when you actually try and implement it in a particular industry, there's enormous problems of bringing large groups of companies on stream and standardizing in terms of the standards problems and training of the use of the equipment and so on.
So it's pretty difficult to implement in practice then?
Well, the problem is that people must have the right software, they must go through the whole learning curve, and a lot of people who have gone into EDI do talk about this learning curve that you do have to go through to actually make the systems usable. But when they actually do go for it, I mean, to be fair, they are convinced that it's the way to go. It's just the problem of bringing on large communities of people in the same kind of business areas.
I know there are large communities, but isn't one of the problems with EDI at the moment is that it's a niche market and seen by many to be such?
Well, traditionally, EDI has developed within groups of industries, areas where they're in the same sort of business, where they can standardize more easily on the kind of invoicing and trading systems they already have. So that's the model that has developed. But that in itself has problems because you're then in closed groups, which makes it difficult for EDI to permeate more widely.
I think over the next 12 months we might see a lot of major moves in the EDI world then to try and make it, to give it a bit more publicity. You know, costs of operating might come down perhaps with more vans and VADs and you know, selling services. Do you think that might be possible?
I think the point you raised earlier was the question of things like ISDN development, which is a generic network which could help EDI, but the question is there any relationship between the two? I think more likely it's just a continued slow and steady growth and development on the question of standards as well.
Okay, well let's move from one technology to another. Suppliers of computer graphics equipment and services gathered at Alexandra Palace this week for the 10th Computer Graphics Exhibition and Conference. We sent reporter Julian Woodfield along to catch up on what's happening in the industry.
The annual Computer Graphics Exhibition is now in its 10th year, and this year is being held here at the Alexandra Palace in North London. The exhibition is designed to provide a showcase for the major developments in computer animation, and also to provide an opportunity for those in the industry to find out what each other have been doing over the course of the last year. There are over 100 exhibitors here, each selling their product or service to the professionals and enthusiasts who come here from all over Europe for the computer graphics industry's major annual get-together. One of the fields featured most strongly this year is computer animation, a relatively new form of communication. The first computer animation companies in the UK were born in the early 1980s, offering new creative options to those working in the television, advertising and communication industries. Since then, the business has expanded rapidly. Today, computer-generated images are used by architects to present a point-of-view journey around a proposed building, by car designers to explore different environments, and by companies using them as a means of corporate presentation.
The principal advantages of computer animation over other media are the realism that it gives you and the sense of depth that it gives you, and the fact that it gives you economies of scale, which a lot of other media will not give you. I mean, twice as much of hand animation costs twice as much, whereas with computer animation it's not necessarily the case. Our client base is roughly evenly divided between corporate people, broadcast graphics, television graphics, and idents, and then the other third of it would be commercial graphics for TV commercials.
How has the decline in the amount of money being spent on advertising and television graphics affected your business?
There has been a decline in spend in advertising and in broadcast graphics, and the net result of this is that there's less money around to experiment, I suppose, and there's less sort of entertainment money, if you like, to try out new ideas, and it's forced us to go out and look for a larger number of smaller clients, which is hard to do.
Maintaining a competitive edge in a rapidly changing market like computer animation? Is that tricky, or is it something that you can live with quite happily?
It is difficult to maintain a competitive edge, and it's difficult to know what that competitive edge is. Sometimes, I mean, in the past it's been technology, and now I think it's becoming creativity, and that's much harder to define and much harder to demonstrate as a sort of advantage that you have over someone else. And all we can do in that situation is just continue to do nice things and hope that people are interested in them.
What further applications do you envisage for computer animation?
The further applications that we expect to see will tend to be in the corporate areas, especially I think in legal areas where you'll have reconstructions of liabilities, things like that, which is already big business in the US. And virtual reality will give us new markets as we create sort of virtual landscapes to play new kinds of games inside of.
So what is virtual reality? Well, it's the next step, some would say quantum leap, from computer animation. Imagine getting to your personal desktop computer first thing in the morning, and instead of tapping a keyboard or clicking a mouse, you donned a helmet or a glove or even an overall bodysuit. Once in this armory, you could then walk about in a computer-simulated environment, one with which you can interact, just like you interact with the real world. When you turn your head, your viewpoint shifts. You can pick objects up, you can even play remote games with others on the same system, or travel to distant, exotic landscapes. It's this extraordinary experience that is called virtual reality, and over the next 10 years, its designers claim that it will revolutionize the workplace. The system is being publicly demonstrated for the first time in the UK, here at the exhibition.
Virtual reality is basically a combination of technologies which are being used to provide hopefully more productive and more intuitive man-machine interfaces. So we're looking at providing a more intuitive interface between a computer and its user. What's now happening is that we have the ability to put a user actually in a completely artificial environment with which he can react and interact much more naturally.
Who is using this type of system?
These sorts of virtual reality systems, there's a lot of research going on into a number of areas. For example, architectural systems, or it can enable an architect who's designed a building to actually put a user into that building and actually walk around the building, look at different aspects of the building, the proportions, the lighting.
How would virtual reality affect, for example, the office environment?
Well, nobody's really looked in that much detail at how this sort of system could be used in the office, but you could imagine that you could actually create a completely virtual filing system. So instead of having normal filing cabinets, you actually have computer-generated filing cabinets. The secretary or database user could actually open a drawer of the filing cabinet, pull out a file, which is a completely computer-generated artificial file, read the data on the file, and throw it away. When he's finished with his session, click a button, and all the files suddenly get reorganized in the filing cabinet.
How far away do you feel it is before this type of system is freely available on the market?
Well, we see that certainly in the entertainment industry, this sort of technology is probably going to be quite widely used within the next 2 years. And certainly cost reductions are going to mean that very simple virtual reality type systems will be seen in PCs probably within 2 or 3 years. In terms of trying to generate something even close to reality, we're probably looking at least 5 or 6 years away.
Do you feel any threat to your computer animation market from developments such as virtual reality?
No, I don't think virtual reality is a threat at all. In fact, I think just the opposite. I think virtual reality gives us a new place to sell animation because we will be able to create virtual worlds to play new kinds of games inside of, which should be lots of fun.
Well, Julian Woodfield there at the Computer Graphics Show at LA Pally. Well, last week we gave you details of Motorola's wireless local area network. Today in the studio we have Norman Croft, Director of Telecommunications Policy, to tell us all about the announcement. Well, Norman, thank you very much for joining us this morning. To start off with, the announcement could, in many senses, revolutionise the office environment. Is it as shattering as it sounds?
We believe it is. The concept sprang out of a policy which we had started about 5 years ago to look at ways in which we could bring about the wireless society. And the wireless in building approach is just one of those steps. So we've announced the technology really to prepare the market, to give an indication of what you can do with wireless in building. The idea is to use the system so that you can free the workstations in the office from the constraints of cable.
Right, for those who didn't hear the announcement on the program last week, basically we're talking about computers with small aerials that communicate to each other and to a central file server, for example?
Yes, the idea is that you connect your your networks, your LANs can be entirely wireless, and a small, very low power radio unit is attached to the workstation, and that communicates with a central radio unit that interconnects the network.
Why has no one done this before? I believe you're exploiting a frequency that is as yet unused.
Yes, it was necessary to find the right frequency band in which to operate. We wanted to have one in which you could cover a reasonable office area, and which in itself wouldn't have such high range that adjacent offices would interfere with each other. So we can separate offices by as little as 30, 40 meters without them interfering with each other's radio systems.
What sort of problems did you encounter in developing it? It's not just the frequency, was it?
No, we had to design radio equipment that would work at those frequencies, that could be cost-effective and reliable. Cost-effective in the sense that you have to put together a radio equipment and a system which will compete effectively with cable costs. And what we have is a solution that is in fact cheaper than cable, and of course has much more flexibility. It means that you can move the workstations about in the building, relocate people, move to new buildings without any difficulty whatsoever, and of course very little additional cost.
Obviously potential users be very interested to see it. When will it actually be demonstrated at a show, for example?
Well, we're going to announce the first products in the first quarter of next year, initially in the United States, and we hope to follow in Europe. There is the question there of how soon we can access the radio spectrum, and that is under discussion currently.
How easy do you think it'll be to get approval for it in other countries, apart from the US?
It's difficult to be exact, but the interesting thing about the technology is that it uses such low power and the range is so short that it can coexist with other radio users in the same frequency band. So, for example, where we have point-to-point radio links already using the band, this system could be put in without interfering with them or being interfered with. Both systems could coexist. So it's not necessary to find an entirely new radio band, nor is it necessary to move somebody out of an existing one.
The question of health and safety is uppermost in many people's minds these days, with concerns over the amount of equipment in offices. Is that something that's been considered at this stage?
Yes, very much so. I mean, it is an extremely low power system. It uses milliwatts of energy, and of course the system isn't on continuously. It is intermittent in operation. And at that frequency, the attenuation through space is fairly high, and so it's quite safe.
Okay, lastly, to digress slightly, you saw virtual reality there and the talk of how that might affect the office environment. Do you think it's a serious option?
I'm not so sure about virtual reality. I believe what we have will be reality very shortly, and a very effective form of reality.
Well, Norman, thank you very much. We look forward to covering it further on down the line. Thank you. Clive.
Now it's time for our contribution for the British Computer Society. This week it's the turn of Carol Beach, and she's looking at the role of management in IT.
Good morning. The information technology world, by its very nature, is full of able, technical people. People who are well qualified and have many years of experience. What it does not have in large numbers is people with managerial qualifications and training. It does, however, need them. It needs them now and will need them increasingly over the next decade. Why these people are needed and what you, the employers, can do about producing them is the subject of my talk today. First of all, let me give you a scenario. Remember, I am talking about senior managers who are likely to be in their mid-30s at least. And of course, many of them will be considerably older. Now, I am not for one moment suggesting that these people have not kept themselves up to date technically, or that you have not provided the wherewithal to enable them to do so. What I am saying is that when the majority of these people were at university or polytechnic getting their science qualification, there was nothing in the course that could be described as managerial training, and also that very little of the training they have had since then has contained any either. The other factor we have to take into account is that although computer projects are getting bigger and more complex, they're also getting less technical. Personally, I would be interested in finding out how many people still use assembler language. I do not think it is very many, and even COBOL is less widely used than it was 5 years ago. Also, as the need to become more globally competitive increases, the IT function of any company, be it large or small, must be well managed. So that is the scenario. You have technically able people without managerial training or experience, and the slot that some of them will fill requires both IT and managerial knowledge. Which brings me very nicely onto the next part of this talk, namely the type of person who will fit into this slot. Personality testing is becoming more widely used by employers to determine appropriate career paths. One of the most common, Myers-Briggs, uses indicator types, and these were used in some work done on IT staff profiles. The results showed 66% of IT staff were introvert, as against 33% of the general population. As might be expected, a high proportion were also thinking people and capable of making judgment. But when considering potential IT managers, look for the extrovert. By definition almost, a manager is someone who wants to work with and is capable of leading other people. Finally, having committed your company to provide business training for your IT managers, and for it to succeed, there must be commitment from the top. What options are available? These, of course, will depend on the size and structure of the company. But one of the most successful is the short total immersion course run externally. Other possibilities are hands-on business training, that is, doing a real job, or acting as a consultant to a business unit, participating in company-wide committees or user groups, preferably non-IT. Yes, of course there will be some disruption, some upheaval, some mistakes even. But to become globally competitive, and in some cases survive, your IT function must be well managed. And for that to happen, you must train your IT managers.
And now for more of the news. Cellular stocks in the US are in a downward spin. Since mid-1989, the one-time glamour shares have lost half their value, according to a report in the New York Times. Shares in McCaw Cellular Communications, in which British Telecom has invested heavily, have plummeted 73% to just $12.75. The decline is being attributed to nervousness about the commercial viability of the system. According to the New York Times, bankers are worried about whether airtime rentals can bring in enough revenue to ensure the repayment of the loans.
New Minister for Industry Lord Hesketh, whose responsibilities include IT, has admitted at his first official engagement that his knowledge of the computer industry is not all that it might be. Speaking at the 1990 Computer Industry Training Awards ceremony at the House of Commons, he said his first job would be to bring himself up to date with IT and the other industries he now looks after. As yet, he says, he can't even use a keyboard. The appointment will do little to win over those who feel the government should pay the computer industry more attention.
A software bug in Mercury's card payphones could be costing the company millions of pounds. The bug makes it possible for people to use the phones for free, even if they've no special knowledge or equipment. The bug means that people can make calls without any units being deducted from their phone cards. Mercury says that the faulty software will be replaced in 3,000 payphones over the next 2 weeks. The payphones are manufactured by a GPT subsidiary Paytelco and have been sold to more than 40 countries around the world. But GPT will not say if the fault has been affected on all its payphones.
Computer services company EDS is softening its attitude towards graduates who leave the company before their training contracts expire. The company has a policy of making some staff repay the cost of their training. This enables the company to recoup its investment in training and cut staff turnover. But now the company is introducing a sliding scale of charges to be paid by employees who leave before the end of their contracts. In effect, this will reduce the amount that most graduates have to repay if they leave or are fired within 2 years of signing a training contract.
A Spanish company has launched what is thought to be Europe's first newspaper designed to be delivered by facsimile machine. Dario Fax is a daily focusing on business and financial matters and will initially be available in Madrid and Barcelona.
Toshiba's first and long-awaited colour portable is one of a number of products it's launching this morning. Our reporter Andrew Winter talked to Toshiba earlier this week about the new products.
We're introducing a colour machine for the first time, a new notebook machine, and also 2 upgrades in terms of storage capacities to existing machines. The colour machine is the T5200 colour and will obviously for the first time have a colour liquid crystal display. It utilises a 386 based processor running at 20 megahertz, incorporates up to 200 megabytes of hard disk storage and has a full-size keyboard and onboard expansion facilities for network cards. The new notebook is called the T1000 LE, and whilst retaining Toshiba's A4 form factor with the key ergonomic factors of the low keyboard and the high quality definition screen, is enabled for the first time to incorporate both a hard disk drive at 20 megabytes and also a floppy disk drive into that same small unit. The 2 upgrades we're putting in are to existing machines. For the T5200, we're introducing a 200 megabyte hard disk drive for the first time, and for its slightly smaller brother, the T3200SX, which is based on the 386SX processor, we're able to introduce a 120 megabyte processor for the first time.
How long did it take Toshiba to make that decision that the colour portable was the way forward?
Colour has always been a thing that we've strived for, ever since we had the true vision that the portable was the way of the future. We were showing prototype portables, I think, some 2 years ago originally. We've really only got to a stage where we believe that the quality of the colour screen, together with the price, is acceptable as far as the customer is concerned, and therefore it's now that we're able to launch a quality colour product into the marketplace.
But is colour really that important?
Colour has major benefits, particularly as we move into the areas of these graphical user interfaces I talked about. When people want to put either a series of images on the screen, or possibly a set of moving images, as we're now seeing for some of this interactive video type applications, then colour really comes into its own. The T5200 screen that we're showing here now is one which actually uses liquid crystal display technology, but not quite in the usual format. Let me explain. It's a simple matrix technology. If you understand your television screen, the way that the picture changes is by scanning down the screen on a series of lines. The LCD technology works in exactly the same way, but it can't respond quite as quickly, and therefore what's called the refresh rate, in other words, the speed which it moves from one image to the next, can be somewhat slow. Toshiba have actually made a major innovation in this, in that rather than taking the whole screen, they've split the screen into 2 halves. So what that means quite clearly is it speeds up the refresh rate. But it doesn't only give that benefit. That also gives the benefit of being able to pinpoint the image that much more sharply, giving an improved contrast ratio, and also improves the viewing angle, so that more than one person, as traditionally has been seen with an LCD screen, is able to look at that screen in an effective manner. Built in with these sort of machines is the ability to put in networking cards, either for remote communications, you could even do it when you're away abroad with a modem, or when you come back into the office with an onboard card, or in the case of the notebooks, by having the new docking stations, which we're also announcing today, you can come back into the office, slot your machine straight back into the office network, download any information perhaps that you've put together while you've been away, and also pick up any data files for information that you need for your day's work. So that it has true flexibility. Not only can you have the information that's based in the office, but you can take your machine away, update, reprocess information, and then share that with other people.
And how much will these products cost?
Well, the T5200 Colour is going to be introduced at a price premium of around £800 above its normal gas plasma screen counterpart. So we're talking at a price of around, recommended retail price of around £6,500. The new notebook portable, that's the T1000LE, is going to come in an extremely competitive price of around £1,500. That enables it to be used not only by the business user, but that becomes a very affordable price as far as the home user or the single-person business is concerned. And that machine offers all the functionality that those sort of users actually use.
Well, how do you pick up the pieces when the worst happens? Well, it helps if your computer strategy includes a disaster recovery plan. Yesterday, the Survive Disaster Recovery Group held its second conference on the subject. This morning in Face-to-Face, Ken talks to Andrew Hiles, chairman of Survive, about the issues the conference raised.
Welcome to the programme, Andrew.
Thank you.
So how did the conference go? What was the atmosphere like?
It was very lively. There was lots of participation from the delegates there, lots of interest in what was being said. It was certainly quite a lot of activity generated, lots of questions. Very good.
Were there any particular areas that of particular concern this year compared to the year before?
Yes, the thing that came over this year particularly was that the disaster recovery plan, we've always tended to treat it as something from computing in isolation from computing services or DP or MIS or whatever. Whereas this year, the thing that came over really strongly was that you can't look at the computing disaster recovery plan in isolation from the rest of the business. And sometimes we may be trying to back up the whole of the normal business running, but if you've lost a lot of the business as well, the needs are quite different. And one needs to think of what the real business needs be in perhaps what could be a new startup situation. And that was a theme that tended to run through the conference.
Is it moving more towards prevention rather than cure?
Well, there's a lot of pressure on budgets this year, particularly if you're worried about whether you're going to turn in a profit this year or whether you're going to survive next year commercially, then people are looking to save money on discretionary expense, and I guess that's what a lot of people think disaster recovery is. But money spent on prevention is being seen, I think, as increasingly good value. So, yes, there's a tendency that way.
Obviously, the numbers were up this year, now that you're gathering a bit of momentum. Is it a different type of person or more of the same?
Well, we've tried to present a range of activities this year. So, although we have had 3 conferences, this is the 4th in just over 12 months, there have been different people from the companies attending them. We allow substitutions. And so we have attracted people from systems areas and from telecommunications areas and from personal computing area, as well as the traditional mainframe and mini people.
And do they feel that the message is raising up in terms of priorities even at boardroom level?
I think so, although there is still a distressing number of people who say they're having trouble selling the concepts to the board and actually getting commitment from the board. Lip service is paid to it, but the budget doesn't go along with it.
Let's look at the conference now. What sort of questions came up from the floor?
One particularly concerned question was about liability generally. In this particular case, the company had regularly, every day, had done backups of a very large database. They knew the backup system worked because they had had to invoke the previous generations to recover files and recover small databases. However, when they came to recover a large database, they discovered that for the last 3 months or so, they had been backing up nothing. There was a bug in the operating system. And the consequential question of liability came up in respect of that and poor delivery on software and hardware systems and so on.
How are they pursuing that one then?
Well, they I think have learned the problem now. They didn't actually suffer a major disaster, but they could have done. And clearly the supplier is addressing the issue.
What was your personal feeling that the supplier was liable?
My personal view is that obviously software and systems should be fit for the purpose. But the trouble is you're stretching technology all the time. You're doing things that the original operating system wasn't envisaged as handling. And I can understand the difficulty of actually testing properly. But it does stress the importance of testing everything and taking absolutely nothing for granted in the disaster recovery plan.
Okay, so difficulties there on legislation and legal aspects. We'll come back to that in a minute. Over to you, Clive.
Well, we'll take a break from disaster recovery for a moment to look at a couple of new machines available on the market in the benchmark slot. This week, David Biggins is looking at a workstation from Mitac and a laptop from Zenith.
The Zenith is the first truly portable laptop PC we've yet tested in this series. It weighs no more than 2.7 kilos, that's about 6 pounds, but needless to say, there's a trade-off between power and size. Although it includes a 20 megabyte internal hard disk, there's obviously no room for internal expansion boards or even an internal floppy disk drive. The processor itself is a relatively slow ATC88. The C indicates that it uses CMOS technology, which is better suited to the smaller battery-driven systems. This system is suitable, indeed excellent, for work in transit, on the train or waiting in a reception area perhaps, but is not recommended for running high-power application software on the desktop. The whole unit is supplied with an external power supply and battery charger, an external floppy disk drive, and a communications package called Fastlinks. The battery charger can be used to power the system when it's used close to a mains power supply. Otherwise, it's used to charge the battery. The charge time is just 3 hours, and this will give you, depending upon the type of work you're doing, several hours of usage. The nickel-cadmium battery pack is located on the left-hand side and just slides out. A second lithium battery is housed underneath to provide continuous power for the date and time clock, and also to maintain anything held in RAM while you're changing batteries. The external disk drive connects via the left-hand port at the back of the system. Power to the disk drive is provided down the same cable. Next to this are 3 other ports: a serial port for a printer or mouse, a parallel printer port, and a video port for an external monitor. The Fastlinks comms package allows the Minisport to communicate with a remote MS-DOS system. It even allows you to upload the package itself into the remote system, and once installed, either system can send data to or take it from the other. Other features worth noting include the optional modem that just slides into the side. The setup program will allow you to switch off the screen to conserve the battery, and the lid warning buzzer will stop you closing the lid if the system is still powered up. The RAM disk will automatically use any available memory above the 640K DOS conventional memory. Since there are 1 and 2 megabyte versions of the Minisport, this gives you either a 384K or a 1408K RAM disk designated as Drive D. An LED labelled SDD, Silicon Disk Drive, under the screen will show whenever this disk is being accessed. I'm slightly concerned by the battery. It's got warnings on it saying do not short circuit, and yet the connectors are 3 flat metal plates underneath, which means that if you put it down on a conductive surface, you're in trouble. MyTAC's MyStation 2 is a neat, very low profile 286 based system. Low profiles look attractive, but they have their drawbacks. First of all, it means that you have to arrange any expansion cards horizontally rather than vertically, and this means that the height of the system box governs the number of expansion slots supplied. The lower the profile, the fewer the cards. Things start well, with 2 screws to open the machine, but a closer look inside reveals the compromises. First of all, is it called the MyStation 2 because it uses the 286 processor at 12 MHz, or because there's only 2 expansion slots? This is a direct consequence of the low profile. Only 2 expansion slots is rather limiting for a standard PC. These slots are genuinely free, since all of the peripheral devices are interfaced directly to the motherboard and don't require separate cards. The position of the 287 coprocessor slot is easy to access, provided it isn't covered by a card in the lower slot. The RAM slots, however, are permanently accessible in front of the power supply. On the downside, the low profile means that all the internal devices need to be positioned side by side, hence the Western Digital IDE hard disk being positioned behind rather than above or below the single 3.5-inch floppy disk drive. There's no room for any other internal storage device, since the height of the RAM chips precludes using the only other available area. This arrangement also means that the 2 disk drives cover a greater part of the motherboard, which could make system maintenance more difficult and time-consuming. So, what should we make of the MyStation 2? It's a mid-range system with limited expansion capability. In other words, it's probably best not to think of it or use it as a desktop power machine. It is, however, a more than adequate local area network workstation, just as its name implies. One of those expansion slots should then be reserved for a network interface card. The MyStation 2 is, I'm afraid, average. On most of the tests it falls somewhere in the middle of the pack, with few particularly good or bad points. Its disk random access is a little weak, it's even outperformed by the Zenith Mini Sport, and it only manages 1 transaction per minute more than the IBM PS1. But as a corporate net station, WP system or small accounting machine, it would be unexcitingly safe. As a personal system, spreadsheet machine or DTP system, I'd get something with an SX in it. The Mini Sport, not surprisingly, is the least powerful of the systems I've looked at, but that's mostly due to its trade-off of performance to weight. Its CGA screen would tend to rule out more sophisticated DTP applications, and it wouldn't really have the power for large spreadsheets or any Windows-based software. But it certainly has 60% of the performance of other laptops, such as the Sharp 5541, at half the weight. Certainly, if you were looking for a portable for word processing or simple database applications, it would be excellent, and certainly it would be more portable than most of its competitors.
Well, Dave Biggins there with the unexcitingly safe MyStation. Well, joined once again by Andrew Hiles of Survive. Andrew, talking about the conference you've just had, what about the whole issue of halon gas? I know that came up and...
Yes, that sparked quite a lot of interest. Basically, I think there was general unhappiness with halon, both for the environmental issues. It's a good ozone blaster.
How bad is it environmentally?
Oh, about the worst, as far as we heard yesterday. It is very bad. And one of the things about discharges is that most discharges do not put out fires. Only 1 in 10 halon discharges put out a fire with minimal damage, which means there's an awful lot of ozone being blown away for no good reason. A lot of that goes in testing, and pressure testing with fans, using fans, fan pressure testing is obviously far better than just releasing halon for the sake of it. And since a lot of fire starts from outside the installation, when halon drops, if it's not contained, if the fire is coming from outside, it does very little good. And also, if the halon drops when there is a fire and the temperature is over around about 500 degrees C, it deconstitutes. You get bromides and fluorides produced, which are exceedingly corrosive. So it's the best we've got at the moment.
Yeah. And are there real vested interests here? Are the suppliers actively looking for alternatives, or?
Well, other alternatives are being examined, but it seems that they're considerably more expensive, by anything up to a factor of 10 again, more expensive than the halons. So it doesn't look as if in the near future there's too much alternative. Water in some places, maybe CO2 in some places, but for the time being, halon, it looks to be the best we've got.
You learned a little bit more about the DEC experience. What
Yes,
can you tell us there?
Well, that's a classic case of not a single cause of an accident. There appears to have been building design issues, the actual design of the sprinkler system, where when the roof started to collapse, the insulation fell on top of the sprinklers and limited their effect.
Just for those who don't know about it, can you summarise what happened?
Yes, there's a fire in a £27 million installation at Basingstoke called the Crescent, which was the European support headquarters for digital equipment. And it was fairly extensively burnt out. Most of the first floor was burnt out. The computing installation, which was at the coldest end, if you like to put it that way, was largely saved, but most of the staff were relocated, and there's clearly quite a lot of disruption to business. If anybody managed to turn a disaster into triumph, then that was a case of it, because certainly digital got a lot of good PR out of it, and the story that they told yesterday was very interesting.
So what were the key points of what they told?
The key points there were, again, not to take anything for granted. Check out the building itself for possible design features which might aid the spread of fire. Make sure that the fire brigade really do understand the way in which you are set up. Make sure that you have a simple thing like tarpaulins available to cover your computers so that they don't get flooded, which saved a lot of money in that case. And again, the personnel issues came over very, very strongly. It was a case of, firstly, business continuity. worrying about what to do there, at the same time addressing the people issues, and then finally looking at the computing aspect of it.
Okay, Andrew, but very, very briefly, where does Survive go from here?
Well, from here we're looking for more international links. We've got a fraud conference planned for the 11th of March, which should be very exciting. We've got Assistant Chief Constable Michael Hedges from Bristol Crime Squad talking about fraud and the police view of it, which should be great because that's the area of the BAE, £40 million alleged fraud is being investigated in. And we've got a very good, strong programme with Ken Wonk speaking also, investigation of fraud and so on.
Good.
Very
All
strong.
right. Andrew, thanks for coming on, and we look forward to hearing more as it develops. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clive.
Well, if you were watching last week's programme, you'll know that we looked in detail at the new range of IBM 486 machines. This week in our Viewpoint section, Chris Long gives his opinion of the range and what it says to him about IBM.
By now you'll probably have heard about the latest addition to IBM's PS2 stable, and it marks IBM's first serious foray into the 486 market. Certainly it's about time. In the old days, IBM would lead the PC market by being the first to launch the new technology. Indeed, it was creating it. Companies would watch with bated breath and react accordingly. Then for some unknown reason, Big Blue seemed to step down from its commanding position and play the waiting game. The first 80386 was launched by either Compaq or ALR. It depends on whose press release you read. And even diminutive British manufacturer Apricot managed to be the first with the 486. Throughout this, IBM was bringing up the rear, launching its PS2 equivalents months or even years after everyone else. Given its clout, this was an odd situation for IBM to be in. IBM invented the PC. How could they let everyone else steal a march on them? It was probably a surprise. Traditionally, IBM has had its markets to itself. The mainframe market was split between a few major players, and IBM took the lion's share. But the PC market was different. IBM had opened up the inside of the PC for the rest of the world to copy, and copy it they did, in big numbers. So much so that in 1987 IBM launched its PS2 range, which it hoped would re-establish it in the personal computer market. Well, the results are questionable. People buy PS2s all right, but why? Is it because of the arguably better technology, or because it comes from IBM? Rather than ponder the imponderable, let's look at the new machines. The PS2 Model 90 and 95 are 486 PCs, thus proving incontrovertibly that IBM was awake when Intel released the 486 chip. The interesting part of the announcement was the portable, the P75. It has a gas plasma display, a very large hard disk, a 486 chip, and weighs 21 pounds. At 21 pounds, it's not what you call a particularly portable. In fact, at 21 pounds, it probably has more use as a bodybuilding device. Why is it the world's biggest computer company can't make a portable to match the likes of Toshiba and Compaq? Not as though they don't have the resources. It goes back to IBM's approach. Everything at IBM seems to be built around their it's our ball, it's our ballpark, and it's our rules attitude. It's the sort of attitude that makes it okay to release its first proper 486, something like 18 months after everybody else. Although IBM is number one, its number oneness has been under siege for a while, and while it fails to react to the market with anything approaching speed and alacrity, it will never regain the ultra-strong position it used to have. Times have changed and moved on. If IBM don't take up the challenge, they'll get left even further behind. Given current trading conditions, it's not such a good idea to be last out of the trap.
Chris Long on IBM. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Do join us again for Dossier on Tuesday and Analysis on Thursday. For the moment, though, it's goodbye from everyone here on the Computer Channel. Goodbye.